Hi everyone, Michelle here. Today we're going to talk about something that quietly kills a lot of Hoyas. And the frustrating part is most of us actually think we're helping when we do it. Unfortunately, I've fallen in this trap myself. It's the repot, not this pot size, not even the soil mix. It's whatever happens to the roots while we're repotting. And so I'm going to say something that might surprise some people. The majority of Hoya repot problems don't come from the substrate. It comes from how much we disturb the roots during the transfer. And I know this because I've done it many times. I've rinsed roots clean under the sink. I've trimmed every last rotted looking root. I've given plants a fresh start. And then I watch those same plants sit there for months. No growth, no progress. Sometimes the leaves got super thin or even turned yellow and dropped off the plant. So today I want to walk you through what's actually happening under the soil line, why Hoyas react so strongly to root disturbances, and how you can repot in a way that hopefully avoids the long-term recovery stall. If you've ever repotted a Hoya and thought, why is this plant suddenly acting like it forgot to grow? You're definitely not alone. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that happens. If you liked today's video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. That lets the word get out to the plant YouTube universe that my channel is here and that I'm out here producing Hoya videos, hopefully every week. If you'd like to help out the channel further, please consider subscribing. I just passed 1,300 subscribers, which I just can't believe, but I would love it if you felt that you'd want to subscribe as well. And if you'd like to help this video further, please put a comment in the comment section down below. I do read and respond to all the comments in my comment section, but please give me a day or two, so it may take me a little bit to get back to you, but I will, I promise. Before we go any further, I want to share one quick observation that completely changed how I repot Hoyas. Healthy Hoya roots are not fragile because they are weak. They're fragile because they're highly sophisticated. And when we disturb them too much, the plant essentially has to rebuild its entire water absorption system, which means growth pauses, sometimes for weeks and sometimes for months. Once I understood that, and I'll admit that this was fairly recently, my repotting strategy completely changed, and my plants started recovering much faster. Let's talk about feeder roots. This is the part most people never see. Hoyas rely on extremely fine root filaments called feeder roots. These are tiny hair-like structures that actually handle most of the plant's work. They're responsible for water absorption, nutrient uptake, mineral exchange, and oxygen transfer within the root zone. The thicker roots mostly function as structure and transport, but the feeder roots are the real workhorse. And here's the problem. Feeder roots are extremely delicate. They can snap, they can bruise, they can dry out, and they can be destroyed incredibly quickly during repotting, sometimes in seconds. So when I used to aggressively clean or untangle a root ball, I wasn't making it neat. I was removing the plant's ability to drink. And when that happens, the plant goes into recovery mode. Energy that normally goes into leaves and vines suddenly gets redirected towards rebuilding the root system. That's why you often see this exact sequence after a rough repot. First, the plant pauses, then you might lose a leaf, then the plant just sits there. That quiet stall can last much longer than people expect. Now here's the part that makes repotting even trickier. When roots are damaged, they start forming protective tissue. Think of it as a plant creating a type of scar layer. That layer protects the root, but it also temporarily changes how water moves into the plant. Now combine that with a substrate change. Suddenly the plant is dealing with two problems at once. First, damaged roots. Second, a completely new moisture environment. Different drying speeds, oxygen levels, and water retention. So now the plant has to rebuild roots and relearn its environment at the same time. That's the double stress problem, and it's the main reason why Hoyas sometimes stall after repotting. Even experienced growers accidentally create this problem. My first videos on this channel featured me aggressively repotting Hoyas and trimming roots. I had a few bad habits that are common in my plant experience. The first one is bare rooting when it isn't necessarily. I used to strip almost every bit of soil or pond off the root ball when repotting. While this can be necessary sometimes, it's also one of the most traumatizing things we can do to a root system. Another common habit is rinsing roots under running water. It may look satisfying, and everything may become clean, but those delicate feeder roots get blasted away in the process. Another risk is switching substrates too dramatically. For example, from dense peat soil straight into an extremely chunky mix, or soil directly into pond. Those transitions can work, but doing them all at once can shock the plant. And then there's something I used to do all the time, repotting while making multiple changes at once. New soil, different light conditions, different watering schedules. Plants can adapt, but stacking the changes makes it much harder. Now there's one more trap that gets a lot of us, the perfection trap. When we see brown or discolored roots and think they must be rotting or somehow weakened and assume they need trimming. But discolored roots with no breakage, found by gently tugging on the ends, and I'm doing gentle, are still perfectly functional. Trying to trim the roots when only perfect roots are left can actually remove the plant's working root system. And once that system is gone, the plant has to start over. I have had total root die-off after going down this exact road. Fortunately, most of the Hoya recovered, one didn't, but it took over a year for most of my affected Hoya to reach the stage they were before I repotted the plant. Okay, so how do we know what to keep and what to remove? Healthy Hoya roots are usually firm. They feel firm or slightly elastic when you give them a gentle tug. They're normally pale or light tan, but they can be almost dark brown when grown in soil. Compromised roots, on the other hand, might look translucent. They might feel mushy. The outer sheet often pulls away when gently tugged, leaving a hair-like inner core behind. But if the roots are still firm, they're usually salvageable. Here's the rule I follow now. If most of the roots are still firm, I leave them alone, even if they look crazy or have a lot of old substrate on them. You do not need to remove every bit of pond before transferring into soil. Perfection is not the goal, function is. Now let's talk about how I repot my Hoya now. Instead of forcing the plant to adapt instantly, I'm trying to let the plant adapt gradually. That's where a staged transition comes in. The easiest technique is to remove the plant from the pot, but instead of dismantling the root ball, you keep it mostly intact. I personally gently squeeze the entire root ball to gently remove the old substrate, then place it into a slightly larger pot and surround it with the new mix. That way, the original core stays stable and the new roots grow outward into the new environment. This technique should not be used when the majority of the roots have rotted. In that case, you need to gently remove as much of the substrate as possible and trim the roots. But I'll tell you one radical thing. Sometimes the easiest and less stressful thing you can do for a Hoya with rotted roots is to simply cut off all the roots and start over from scratch. This avoids the stress of touching subpar roots and having them fall into that stall period I talked about earlier. Once I started using a gentler approach, my repot started recovering much faster. So here's the exact routine I use now. The day before potting, I make sure the substrate in the pot is still a bit damp. It doesn't have to be much. Substrate falls off the roots easier when lightly damp. I then perform the tug test on a few different places on the root ball. Hydrated roots are flexible. Dry rotted roots snap off with a gentle tug. Traditionally rotted roots come off cleanly or leave a hair-like strand when you pull on them. Now, next, I prepare everything ahead of time. This really makes things go so much easier. I make sure that my scissors are sterilized and that my new substrate is ready and damp, along with a trellis and a clean pot. I choose a pot only one size larger. I don't make a large increase in pot size because the plant will spend more energy on its roots and less to the leaves. When I remove the plant, I press the sides of the pot to loosen so the plant comes out. I try to avoid removing the plant by pulling on the stem. Once the root ball is out, I squeeze the root ball gently to remove the loose substrate while touching the root ball as little as possible. I don't pick the root ball clean anymore, which is on its own a huge improvement. I do not comb through the core. If I see mushy roots, I try to trim only the obviously rotted ones. If there are more advanced issues with root rot, I consider cutting off all the roots and restarting the plant again. After finishing with the roots, I place the plant into a new pot at the same depth it was in before. The new mix goes around and under the root ball, not through it. After that, I water enough just to fully dampen the outer new mix. Then the plant goes into bright, but not direct, light, or less intense grow lights for about 2 weeks. During that time, I leave it alone. I don't fertilize, but I do water the Hoya with Rhizotonic. Now, Rhizotonic, according to their website, is a powerful algae-based vegetative stimulator for plant roots. It contains multiple vitamins, more than 60 microbiological substances, and is 100% natural. Rhizotonic can considerably speed up the growth of a balanced root environment. Now, after the potting is finished, I wait. I use transparent pots so I can see the one key signal: bright white root tips appearing at the edge of the pot. That's the plant telling me it's ready to grow again. Aftercare can determine whether the plant rebounds quickly or stalls. The light should remain bright unless the plant is stressed. In that case, sometimes reducing the photo period slightly helps reduce stress. Airflow is extremely important. Moving airflow prevents stagnant moisture around injured roots. You should lightly water the plant for the first 2 weeks, but don't let it dry out. Water seems to be the key factor in transitioning plants. Once I see the active growth again, I begin feeding lightly, but I usually mix the fertilizer at quarter strength. Heavy feeding too early can overwhelm recovering roots. Now, even when you do everything carefully, sometimes plants still struggle. This is where patience becomes critical. We need to check for early signs of stress: leaf curling that doesn't go away after watering, dull-looking leaves, a softening and thinning of leaf thickness. Sometimes the older leaves yellow first. If this happens, remember that if all stems remain firm, the best move is usually patience. If the root ball stayed too wet, you can remove the plant from the pot and wick moisture away from the outside using paper towels. You would then repot into a slightly drier mix. And if the plant continues declining but viable nodes remain, I always take insurance cuttings. That way I hopefully have at least one healthy part of the original plant. I have several Hoya that I'll be showing in an upcoming video that started out as insurance cuttings but are now larger themselves. That video might actually come out before this one, so I'll put on the screen which one it is. Some of the plants you'll see in the video were actually restarts. They were plants I struggled with during and after repotting. In a few cases, I made drastic root cuts. Then I tried water propagation, which led straight to root rot. I learned something simple from those experiences. If I ever do major root work again, I will immediately take backup cuttings. I take them right away because waiting increases the risk that the cuttings may deteriorate on the stem and then rot when I try to propagate them. Having backups dramatically reduces the stress of experimenting because despite my failures, many of the plants that I repotted in the wrong way are now actually larger than when I first got them, mostly in part to growing all the cuttings in one big pot. Progress doesn't always look perfect. It's like a stock market price graph. There are ups and downs, but as long as you have a growing Hoya, you are ahead of the game. Over time, I stopped doing several things entirely. I stopped chasing perfectly clean roots. I stopped rinsing roots under tap water, especially since my tap water is very hard with a high TDS level. I stopped repotting at the same time I changed lighting conditions, and I stopped sizing up pots just because the plant looked crowded. Now I look for the plant slowing down growth and leaf production levels. If the pot is full, but the plant is still growing, I don't disturb it. I now focus on minimal disturbance and gradual change. The improvement in my plant recovery times has been dramatic. If your Hoyas have ever stalled after repotting, keep in mind that it may not be your light, your fertilizer, or even your soil mix. Sometimes the real issue is we simply handled the roots too much. When I started disturbing the roots less, my survival rate went way up and my plants recovered much faster after repots. If you've ever had a Hoya survive a dramatic repot or have had a dramatic fail, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Your experience helps all of us learn. If you enjoyed this Hoya deep dive video, please leave me a comment and also consider subscribing to my channel. Those help me out so much. Thanks so much for watching until the end. I know you have a lot of pressing things that you can do with your time, and I appreciate that you spent that time with me today. Until next time, I'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.